Am I going insane? Or is the world just going mad? I guess we'll never know. I'm Makensi Grant, and I'm here with The Artist Way Week 2, Going Sane. Okay, this week's actually titled Recovering a Sense of Identity. But the themes are kind of the same. Self-definition of sanity, creativity, and what actions are actually the right one are at the core of what Julia Cameron says this week addresses as you redevelop your own personal identity. But for me, this week was really a week that I focused on friendships in the past and present that maybe I wasn't being my full self in. Just like last week, we're going to start by reading the essay, and then we'll move into some highlights from morning pages as well as the exercises. Let's get going. Week 2, Recovering a Sense of Identity. Going Sane. Trusting our creativity is new behavior for many of us. It may feel quite threatening initially, not only to us, but also to our intimates. We may look and feel erratic. This erraticism is a normal part of getting unstuck. Pulling free from the muck that has blocked us, it is more important to remember that at first flush, going sane feels like going crazy. God, don't I know it. There is a recognizable ebb and flow to the process of recovering our creative selves. This is normal, and we can deal with these stronger attacks when we see them as symptoms of recovery. Common self-attacks are, okay, so I did okay this week, but it's just a temporary thing. Okay, so I got the morning pages done. I probably did them wrong. Okay, so I need to plan something big and do it right away. Who am I kidding? I will never recover. Not right away, not ever. These attacks are groundless, but very convincing to ourselves. Buying into them enables us to remain stuck and victimize. Just as a recovering alcoholic must avoid the first drink, the recovering artist must avoid taking the first think. For us, that think is really self-doubt. I don't think this is any good. These attacks can come from either internal or external forces. We can neutralize them once we recognize them as a sort of creative virus. Affirmations are a powerful antidote for self-hate, which commonly appears under the mask of self-doubt. Early in our creative recovery, self-doubt can lure us into self-sabotage. Do not let your self-doubt turn into self-sabotage. Poisonous playmates. Creativity flourishes when we have a sense of safety and self-acceptance. Your artist, like a small child, is happiest when feeling a sense of security. As our artist's protective parent, we must learn to place our artist within safe companions. Toxic playmates can capsize our artist's growth. Not surprisingly, the most poisonous playmates for us as recovering creatives are people whose creativity is still blocked. Our recovery threatens them. As long as we are blocked, we often feel that it was arrogance and self-will to speak of ourselves as creative artists. The truth is that it was self-will to refuse to acknowledge our creativity. Of course, this refusal has its payoffs. We could wonder and worry about our arrogance instead of being humble enough to ask for help. We could fantasize about art instead of doing the work. But not asking the great creator's help with our creativity, by not being seen by the creator's hand in our creativity, we could proceed to righteously ignore our creativity and never have to take the risk of fulfilling it. Your blocked friends may be self-indulging in all of these comforting self-delusions. If they are having trouble with your recovery, they are still getting a payoff from remaining blocked. Perhaps they're still getting an anorectic high from the martyrdom of being blocked, or they still collect sympathy and wallow in self-pity. Perhaps they still feel smug, thinking how much more creative they could be than those who are out there doing it. Those are toxic behaviors for you now. Do not expect your friends to applaud your recovery. That's like expecting your best friends from the bar to celebrate your sobriety. How could they when their own drinking is something they want to hold on to? Blocked friends may find your recovery disturbing. You're getting unblocked raises, the unsettling possibility that you getting unblocked raises the possibility that they too could become unblocked and moved into an authentic creative risk rather than bench-sitting cynicism. Be alert to subtle sabotage from friends. You cannot afford their well-meaning doubts right now. Their doubts will reactivate your own. Be particularly alert to any suggestions that you have become selfish or difficult. These are red alert words for us. They are attempts to leverage us back into our old ways for the sake of someone else's comfort, not our own. Blocked creatives are easily manipulated by guilt. Our friends, feeling abandoned by our departure from the ranks of the blocked, may unconsciously try to guilt trip us into giving up our newly healthy habits. It is very important to understand that the time given to the morning pages is time between you and the source. You best know your answers. You will lead to new sources of support as you begin to support yourself. Be very careful to safeguard your newly recovering artist. Often, creativity is blocked by our falling in with other people's plans for us. We want to set aside time for our creative work, but we feel we should do something else instead. As blocked creatives, we focus not on our responsibilities to ourselves, but our responsibilities to others. We tend to think such behavior makes us good people. It doesn't. It makes us frustrated people. The essential element is nurturing our creativity lies in nurturing ourselves. Through self-nurturance, we nurture our inner connection to the great creator. Through this connection, our creativity will unfold. Paths will appear for us. We need to trust the great creator and move out in faith. You will learn to enjoy the process of being a creative channel and to surrender your need to control the result. You will discover the joy of practicing your creativity. The process, not the product, will become your focus. Your own healing is the greatest message of hope for others. Crazy makers. A related thing creatives do to avoid being creative is to involve themselves with crazy makers. Crazy makers are those personalities that create storm centers. They're often charismatic, frequently charming, highly inventive, powerfully persuasive, and for the creative person in their vicinity, they're enormously destructive. You know the type. Charismatic but out of control. Long on problems, short on solutions. Crazy makers are the kind of people who can take over your whole life. To fixer-uppers, they're irresistible. So much to change, so many distractions. If you're involved with a crazy maker, you probably already know it, and are certainly recognize the thumbnail description in the paragraph above. Crazy makers like drama. If they can swing it, they are the star. Everyone around them functions as supporting cast, picking up their cues, their entrances and exits from the crazy maker's crazy whims. Some of the most profoundly destructive crazy makers I have ever encountered are themselves famous artists. They are often the kind of artists that give the rest of us bad names. Often larger than life, they require the status by feeding on the life energy of those around them. For this reason, many of the most crazy artists in America are found surrounded by a cadre of supporters as talented as they are, but determined to subvert their own talent in the service of the crazy-making king. The crazy-making dynamic is grounded in power, and so any group of people can function as an energy system to be exploited and drained. Crazy makers can be found in almost any setting, in almost any art form. Fame may help to create them, but since they feed on power, any power source will do. Although quite frequently crazy makers are found among the rich and famous, they are common even among the commoners. Right in the nuclear family, there's a reason we still use that word. A resident crazy maker may often be found pitting family member against family member, undercutting anyone's agenda but his or her own. This is something I'm really familiar with. I grew up in a family that we all tiptoed around the feelings of my mother. If she was upset, we all had to be upset. If she was mad, we needed to figure out what we did. And it's so exhausting. I'm thinking now of a destructive matriarch of my acquaintance. The titular head of a large and talented clan, she had devoted her extensive energies to destroying the creativity of her children. Always choosing critical moments for her sabotage, she plants her bombs to explode just as her children approach success. The daughter struggles to finish a belated college degree, finds herself saddled with a sudden drama the night before her final exam. The son with a critical job interview is gifted with a visitation just when he needs to focus most. Do you know what the neighbors are saying about you? The crazy maker will often ask. And the beleaguered student, mother will hear a horrific round of gossip that leaves her battered, facing her exam week, beset by the feelings of what's the use? Do you realize you're ruining your own marriage with this possible new job? And the son's hopeful career move is ashes before it begins. Yeah, this is exactly what it's like. I grew up in this system, and it literally word for word. I had this happen with exams. I had this happen with job interviews. I had this happen with my birthday. I believe I even talk about that in my notes. We'll see when we get to my morning pages, but I'm positive I talked about how much she used to try and destroy me, because she's one of the biggest ones in my life. Thank you, Mama. Whether they appear as your overbearing mother, your manic boss, your needy friend, or your stubborn spouse, the crazy makers in your life share certain destructive patterns that make them poisonous for any sustained creative work. Crazy makers break deals and destroy schedules. They show up 2 days early for your wedding and expect to be waited on hand and foot. They rent a vacation cabin larger and more expensive than the one agreed upon, and then they expect you to foot the bill. Crazy makers expect special treatment. They suffer a wide panoply of mysterious ailments that require care and attention, whether you have a deadline looming or anything else that draws your attention from the crazy maker's demands. The crazy maker cooks her own special meal in a house full of hungry children and does nothing to feed the kids. The crazy maker is too upset to drive right after he has vented enormous verbal abuse on the heads of those around him. I'm afraid Daddy will have a heart attack, the victim starts thinking, instead of, how do I get this monster out of my house? Crazy makers discount your reality. No matter how important your deadline is, or how critical your work trajectory at the moment, crazy makers will violate your needs. They may act as though they hear your boundaries and will respect them, but in practice, act is the operative word. Crazy makers are the people who will call you at midnight or 6 a.m. saying, I know you asked me not to call at this time, but... Crazy makers are the people who drop by unexpectedly to borrow something you can't find, or don't want to lend them. Even better, they call and ask you to locate something they need and then fail to pick it up. I know you're on deadline, they say, but this will only take a minute. Yeah, you're a minute. Crazy makers triangulate those they deal with. Because crazy makers thrive on energy, your energy, they set people against one another in order to maintain their own power position, dead center. That's where they can feed most directly on the negative energies they stir up. So-and-so was telling me you didn't go to work on time today. A crazy maker may relay. You obligingly get mad at so-and-so and miss the fact that the crazy maker has used hearsay to set you off kilter emotionally. Crazy makers are expert blamers. Nothing that goes wrong is ever their fault, and to hear them tell it, the fault is usually yours. Crazy makers create dramas, but seldom where they belong. Crazy makers are often blocked creatives themselves. Afraid to effectively tap to their own creativity, they are loath to allow the same creativity in others. It makes them jealous. It makes them threatened. It makes them dramatic at your expense. Devoted to their own agendas, Crazy makers impose those agendas on others. In dealing with a crazy maker, you are dealing always with the famous issue of figure and ground. In other words, whatever matters to you becomes trivialized until mere backdrop for the crazy maker's personal plight. Crazy makers deny they are the crazy makers. They go for the jugular. I'm not what's making you crazy, your crazy maker may say when you point out broken promise of a piece of sabotage. It's just that we have a rotten sex life. If crazy makers are that destructive, what are we doing involved with them? The answer, to be brief but brutal, is that we're that crazy ourselves, and we are that self-destructive. Really? Yes. As blocked creatives, we're willing to go to almost any lengths to remain blocked. As frightening and as abusive as life with a crazy maker is, we find it far less threatening than the challenge of a creative life of our own. What would happen then? What would we be like? Very often, we fear that if we let ourselves be creative, we will become crazy makers ourselves and abuse those around us. Using this fear as our excuse, we continue to allow others to abuse us. If you are involved now with a crazy maker, it is very important that you admit this fact. Admit that you are being used, and admit that you are using your own abuser. Your crazy maker is a block you choose yourself to deter you from your own trajectory. As much as you are being exploited by your crazy maker, you too are using that person to block your creative flow. If you are involved in a torture tango with a crazy maker, stop dancing to his or her tune. Pick up a book on codependency, or get yourself to a 12-step program for relationship addiction. The next time you catch yourself saying or thinking, she is driving me crazy, ask yourself what creative work you're trying to block by their involvement. Skepticism. Now, we have talked about the barrier to recover others can present. Let us take a look at the inner enemy we harbor ourselves. Perhaps the greatest barrier for any of us as we look for an expanded life is our own deeply held skepticism. This might be called the secret doubt. It does not seem to matter whether we are officially believers or agnostic. We have our doubts about all of this creativity stuff, and those doubts can be very powerful. Unless we air them, they can sabotage us. Many times, in trying to be good sports, we stuff our feelings of doubt. We need to stop doing that and explore them instead. Boiled down to their essentials, the doubts go something like this. Okay, so I started writing the morning pages and I seem more awake and alert in my life. So what? It's just a coincidence. The reason we think it's weird to imagine an unseen helping hand is that we still doubt it's okay for us to be creative. With this attitude firmly entrenched, we not only look all gift horses in the mouth, we also swat them on the rump to get them out of our lives as fast as possible. One of the things most worth noting in creative recovery is our own reluctance to take seriously the possibility that the universe might just want cooperating with our new expanded plans. We've gotten brave enough to try recovery, but we don't want the universe to really pay attention. We still feel like too much of a fraud to handle some success. When it comes, we want to go. Of course we do. Any little bit of experimenting and self-nurturance is very frightening for most of us. When our little experiment provokes the universe to open a door or two, we start shying away. This next part of the essay, it's called Attention. I'm only going to read a few excerpts from this, that way we can move along and get to my morning pages. Very often, a creative block manifests itself as an addiction to fantasy. Rather than working or living, the now we spin our wheels and indulge in daydreams of could have, would have, should have. One of the great misconceptions about the artistic life is that it entails great swaths of aimlessness. The truth is that creative life involves great swaths of attention. Attention is a way to connect and survive. The reward for your attention is always healing. It may begin as the healing of a particular pain, the lost lover, the sickly child, the shattered dream. But what is healed finally is the pain that underlies all pain, the pain that we all are. utterly alone. More than anything else, at attention, it is an act of connection. Writing about attention, I see that I have written a good deal about pain. This is no coincidence. It may be different for others, but pain is what it took to teach me to pay attention. In times of pain, when the future is too terrifying to contemplate, the past too painful to remember, I have learned to pay attention to right now. For each moment, taken alone, was always bearable. In the exact now, we all are always all right. Yesterday the marriage may have ended, tomorrow the cat may die, the phone call from the lover for all my waiting may never come. But just at the moment, just now, that's all right. I am breathing in and out. Realizing this, I began to notice that each moment was not without its beauty. All right, so now we're going to look over my morning pages. Earlier I mentioned that one of the big things that it unlocked for me is friendship. So most of my excerpts are going to be related to me kind of understanding that a friendship of mine wasn't the best for me. And that I was equating my constant giving with the true level of the friendship. And it really hurt. I had been discovering that this friendship wasn't really conducive to where I wanted to go in life well before I started this process. This has kind of been an ongoing background thought. But this book really forced me to lay it out. And why? It made me look at how she had been a crazy maker in my life for a decade. And how I had thrown aside so much of my own wants and my own hopes to match what she wanted. I'm kind of disappointed in myself. I'm glad I noticed the pattern, but it doesn't make it any less painful. Surviving in this world has led me to abandon myself and to attempt to abandon my ideals. Each push forward in corporate pushed me further into their trap. I was becoming stupid, vapid, and a shell of myself. I enslaved my mind and ignored the questions until I couldn't. My thoughts ripped through the veneer, the rust spots always bled through. Questions saved me. Thoughts saved me. Getting COVID removed the blindfold and showed the true nature of the company, the bosses, and amplified that I don't belong. The places you find yourself have a way of letting you know if it's meant for you. And that world was never meant for me. And every environment I entered slowly started to suffocate me. I don't stay where I'm not welcome. It may take me a while to react, but I do eventually understand. Stoicism hides my emotions in the circumstances. It confuses people, but it has served me well. I can move forward even when it's in friend groups. They can have each other. Treat me like I'm an outsider, and I'll become one. Treat me like you don't care, and suddenly I don't either. People tend to overestimate their place in my life, or underestimate my ability to remove problems. They feed me crap and expect me to still be there. But I'm not, or I've already decided to leave. This April is my beginning. This is where I truly am reborn. I'm left out of so many bad circumstances. I've left people who wouldn't walk forward with me. I've cleared lessons. It might have taken me a while, but this is my rebirth. I'm ready to stand in places that want me. I'm ready to enter spaces meant for me with people who love me. Trying to find the next page that has some notes on the friendship. That way I can keep this going. All right. It's wild and sad how long it took me to realize how fake some of the relationships I had. How much I let people take control over the choices that I made. It took me too long to question. Like, truly question. why people left, why people acted weird towards me, why someone kept getting the benefits, and why it was always the inverse for me. Too tangled to see through. It's all clear now. I had to remove the connection to make space for true connections that don't envy me, that don't just talk about me to others as a way to gain influence. I should have known she was talking about everything I ever said, how she wanted me to know that others asked about me. I truly believe she couldn't just be happy for me, that she wanted my life to go to shit, that she was too keen to show how perfect her relationship was. My gut says to remember how you're ignored. If I don't reach out, they don't ever. I stepped back to create space and was shown they don't care. I was a convenience, something to gossip about, not a friend. I'm so tired of not being anyone's first choice, of being the punching bag. She took up too much space in my life and left little for making friends, all while pushing me out. Looking back now, the pain and anxiety that's just riddled in these pages, it makes me want to cry, just like I did when I wrote them. That friendship I'm talking about was one that kind of defined my 20s. I gave a lot to her and bought into this vision she had for her career. I literally word for word what was mentioned in the Crazy Makers section in this week's essay is what I was playing out for my life for years, with this friendship, but also with other relationships. Several of my other morning pages point out how I did this with boyfriends, which is weird because I like to joke and say that I've never dreamed of a man, and I haven't. But that doesn't mean that I wasn't treating them like they were on a pedestal. Two boyfriends come to mind in my past, specifically one in college, that I was at his beck and call. If he wanted to take a walk in the rain at 2 a.m. after I had worked 2 different jobs and done several hours of classes that day, I would show up instead of letting myself sleep or do my homework. If he wanted to cry and complain about his job instead of following through with a job application that he'd done, I would do that instead of letting myself study for a test. It's a pattern that I've done a lot, and it ties back to my first original crazy maker, which was my mother. And that pattern is something that has stopped me at almost every turn in my life, where instead of being me, instead of being Makensi in my fullest, I have been willing to be someone's entourage. And I don't want to do that anymore. These are the words of a lost woman. She's unsure of herself, and she's definitely unfocused. But even in the midst of this uncertainty, there's moments of clarity. This week is the first week that I had ideas for a future book. It's wild to see how quickly the story summary came together and popped out of nowhere, really, in my morning pages. Especially with me being several weeks later and not really being sure what I have to go off of. I guess that's a problem for a later time. Oh, I guess that's enough trauma dumping for today. I'm gonna get off of here and, I don't know, spend 3 hours in Baldur's Gate 3 resetting my mood. I've been Makensi Grant, and you can help keep me accountable in my goal of being an author by liking and subscribing. Bye now.